Hello, my name is Kern. I'm making a custom Legend of Zelda Magic the Gathering set, and I want to talk about quests, as originally appeared in Zendikar and made a reappearance in Fallout. Pretty early on in my set design, I knew that I wanted quests to be a part of it. I was thinking about what existing mechanics would make sense to return. And this is before Fallout came out, so I had an opportunity to tackle some of the problems that appear in Zendikar style quests before I saw how WotC solved the problem. And in some ways, we made some similar decisions, and in other ways, we made different decisions. And also, quests serve very different purposes in each of those sets. So let's dive into Zendikar quests and kind of explore how they work and what you have to deal with as a designer when you're working on them. So let's start here by taking a look at a classic Zendikar quest. This is IR Ruin Expedition. This was in a cycle of commons that all triggered on landfall. And the basic thing that makes a quest is that it puts quest counters on the permanent with some condition, and then at some point it checks that number of quest counters to give you some benefit. With this cycle of commons, they all trigger on landfall. It just happens to be that way. It doesn't have to only trigger on landfall for quests, but these ones do. And the payoff condition it checks is when there are 3 or more quest counters on this particular card, you can sacrifice it to draw 2 cards. Okay, so pretty straightforward what it's doing. Let's talk about some of the problems. Number one, it's verbose. This is 7 lines of rules text plus a line break, and it pretty much has to be that verbose for the card as designed here. And all the Zendikar style quests have this exact same problem. They're very wordy. None of them are fewer. I think none of them are fewer than 7 lines of text, which, you're kind of stretching it at common when you have that many lines of rules text, even though this card is fairly straightforward to understand what's happening. You're still requiring the player to read a lot of text, and you don't want that when they're opening packs for the first time. Another problem here is that the trigger condition is like a totally different thing than the payoff condition. And the reason why that matters is it means that the card is not doesn't have like a consistent identity to it. Like at some point, when it enters, this is all it's doing is landfall accruing quests. And then at some point, the landfall no longer matters, and it's only this part that matters. And in my head, I'm like, wouldn't this be better as a transforming dual face card? Because that might be more clear what's going on with the card. It also saves you on card space and blah blah blah. So that's kind of an issue, is that these cards like kind of change and dramatically at some point. It's also a problem that you keep accruing these quest counters, but they're not adding anything to it. Like once you get the 3rd quest counter on it, the 4th, the 5th, the 6th doesn't matter. I don't know if that's a problem, potential tracking issue, as much as it is like an opportunity that you could take advantage of as a designer. What are you doing with these additional quest counters on it? Another issue is that this card just plain doesn't do anything. When you do the landfall condition, all it's doing is put a quest counter on. And so it's a potential that this card never gets to do anything. Like if you don't hit your 3rd land drop, or even worse, it gets removed right on the cusp of it actually doing the thing you want it to do, then that's going to feel really bad. And that's just inherently unfun. And I think that's a reason why Zendikar quests were never really popular and why they didn't make a return until Fallout, is because of that issue. Like, okay, then I, as the player, kind of feel bad that I invested not only mana, but an entire card into an effect that didn't do anything. Now, if you get the payoff here with IR Rune Expedition, it's a 2 mana draw 2, which is not bad. But you had to jump through quite a few hoops to do that, and you're never gonna, be able to get its condition satisfied on the turn you play it, without a lot of other stuff going on. And the final problem here, I don't know if it's really a problem as much as it is a puzzle, in that I knew early on that I wanted it to be an archetype. I wanted there to be an archetype that was centered around quests in my set. And the reason for me is like, where do you inject the Zelda flavor? Now, I could just like design the most perfect Zelda flavored card, like we were looking at. I introed the video with the Moonfalls. That's an example of a card that's designed flavor first. The whole point is to how can I capture this idea from Zelda in a card in a complete vacuum, blah blah blah. But that's not actually my primary goal with this set. My primary goal is for the draft archetypes to feel flavorful. So I want the mechanics of the draft, and I want the flavor of the draft, the theming of it to be very, very forward. And I want it to feel like you're role playing essentially as a character or a force or something like that, from the world of Zelda. So quests made sense for me to design an archetype around it, but it's really hard to do that when quests each potentially have a unique trigger condition and they have a unique payoff condition. So how do you design synergy more broadly with that? So we're going to take a look at all of those issues here, and let's start it by taking a look at this one. This only solves one of the problems. This is Zora Musician. It costs the blue for a 1/1 Merfolk Bard Quest creature. Whenever you cast a non-creature spell, put a quest counter on Zora Musician. And as long as Zora Musician has 3 or more quest counters on it, it gets +2/+0 and can't be blocked. So the problem that this solves is it's a creature. And the reason why that matters is it means that the card will do something even if you never get the 3rd quest counter on it. Now, it's not very good. It's just a 1-mana 1/1, but that's all right. I mean, I can chump with it. I can do whatever with it, and maybe I never get to turn its quest condition on, but at least it still did something. Now, is it worth it? Maybe not. This is a draft card for sure. You know, that some decks are going to want to take more highly that are casting enough non-creature spells, or maybe that care about quests. They're going to take this a little more highly, or need this evasive threat for some reason, and feel like they're confident they're going to be able to protect it. Then, like, yeah, maybe you take it more highly. But otherwise, this is kind of a bad draft card, which is good. You know, that's what you want, I think. You want a lot of commons to feel like a lot of people are going to pass it at the table, except for those decks that are really going to be able to get enough advantage out of it that suddenly this is like a C card, you know, in the right deck. But that technology of just making it a creature ends up being a pretty big deal. Now, that's not originally why I made creature quests in my set. The original reason was flavor. You know, if I'm thinking about how do I flavor quests, most quests, you know, in video game RPGs are associated with characters. You know, they're often like the quest givers. And this is one way that me and Fallout are very much so in alignment, because they also decided to put quests on creatures. In fact, I think all of the Fallout quests, I'm pretty sure, are on creatures. So yeah, that made a lot of sense. But this only solves one of those problems, although it's a nice solution to it. Let's take a look at another one that solves a problem in a much bigger way. This is Tingle. You know, it should be legendary with a name here. So this is just showing you that this is in progress, but I'm not going to make a legendary common. So anyway, I don't know what to name him, you know, in some more general way, like, you know, Lost Adult Man or something like that. I don't know. We'll come back to that. Let me know what you think. This is 2 and a green for a 2/2 creature human merchant quest at common. It has reach, and whenever a land enters under your control, put a quest counter on Lost Adult Man. Then if it has 3 or more quest counters on it, create a map token. So the big thing that I want you to check out is this right there. This is 4 lines of rules text as compared to Zora Musician, which has 6 lines of rules text and a line break. So the technology here is, oh, this is going to bother me. I'm just going to change this back. This is going to bother me. Not Tinkle. That's a very different card. Go back. Tingle. The technology here is that the trigger condition is the same as the payoff condition. Right? So that means I'm saving a lot of text. All I have to write is then, and I'm still checking the condition, but that saves a lot of rules text space. Not only that, but it also means that the trigger is consistent. This card always cares about landfall. It doesn't like transform at some point. I mean, it does get like an upgrade once you get the 3rd quest counter, but it always is caring about landfall. It's caring at it to start to accrue the quest counters, and then it's giving you this payoff. Now, it's okay that this doesn't do anything, you know, that this trigger doesn't do anything else on this particular card, because it's still a 2/2 creature with reach. And so it's still going to serve potentially some function on the board, even if you never get to its payoff condition. But it is nice that that's making that consistent. Let's take a look at another example of a card that uses this technology and expands on it. This is Gather Help. It's one of the 2 signpost uncommons in white-blue. And I'm not going to take a look at that archetype in this video, but let me know if you're interested and I'll dive deep. I'm still working on that archetype, and I'm on like my 5th or 6th revision with it, you know. But anyway, that's an open problem still if you're interested in diving into one of those. It costs a white and a blue for an enchantment quest at uncommon. It has Celebration. Whenever a non-land permanent you control enters for the 2nd time each turn, put a quest counter on Gather Help, then you may draw a card. If you do, discard a card unless there are 3 or more quest counters on Gather Help. So it's using the Tingle technology. The trigger condition is the same as the payoff condition, and so that helps the verbosity. It helps it make it more consistent. Now, unlike the other cards I showed you, this is not a creature, so it potentially does nothing, right? Except that this trigger condition does actually do something. So you don't have to get to the 3rd quest counter on it for it to suddenly do something. It's doing something already, which is every time you celebrate, you get to loot. It's just that when you get the 3rd quest counter on it, now it gets better at doing that. And this is really, really fertile design space. Like the Tingle technology is totally fine, when you're designing creature quests. And that makes it really good design space for common. Now I've even got room on the card to add a keyword, and it doesn't feel too verbose. And it also feels pretty believable as a common card. But this is really nice technology, even for creature quests, but especially for non-creature quests like the original enchantments that quests appeared on, to be able to solve that problem of like potentially doesn't do anything by having it, it does something, it just gets better at it when you put the quest counter on it. Okay, so we've solved almost all the problems here, but let's take a look at the archetype one, because that was a hard puzzle to solve. And if you're interested in taking a crack at it yourself, well, first of all, let me set up what the actual problem is, right? I kind of mentioned it before, but the trigger condition for each quest is different, and so is the payoff condition, or like the payoff, what it pays you off with. In this case, you get card advantage. But not all quests care about card advantage, not all quests care about celebrate. So how do you design synergy? And you might start and you say, well, Kern, it looks like you already solved that problem by adding the quest type to the enchantments. I guess that's potentially a solution, but it doesn't actually solve any of the problems here with Zendikar quests. This is for an entirely different reason that maybe I'll get into in a future video if you're interested in that. But it has nothing to do with these inherent problems of Zendikar quests. Because if you say like, okay, just add the type and now have the cards that care about the type, and then boom, you can design an archetype around it. That's a tribal solution. And tribal archetypes do exist in Magic, and they can be quite popular. But what's important with tribal archetypes is that they have a mechanical identity that allows you to have synergy as well. It's not just the type. So take Bloomborough, for example. It's not just green-blue frogs. It's green-blue frogs enters the battlefield. Or it's not just red-blue otters. It's red-blue otters prowess. And that's important because now if I want a card that's going to fit into the Izzet deck, not only can I print otters and things that care about otters, but I can also print any non-creature spell. I can have cards that find non-creature spells, that trigger off non-creature spells. There's so many more things I can do with it. It's so broad and wide open. It's going to be easy for me to design cards that go in it. Having just the quest type, it's not enough. You need something mechanically that's happening to design synergy with as well. Maybe the enchantment type would be enough, and Duskmourn did that with their room archetype, is they had it care more generally about enchantments. And that might be a potential solution, except that I really want quests to appear on creatures, and so I kind of shot myself in the foot if my main goal here is to squeeze it into an archetype. So how do you do that? How do you design something that mechanically synergizes in a broad way with what quests are doing? And pause the video here if you want to take a crack at solving the puzzle yourself. I'd be interested to hear if you have a totally different solution than me. That'd be kind of cool. But here I go. I'm going to reveal my solution. So what is consistent across quests? And it's this part. It's the quest counter. Now that's not a full solution in itself, because if I print cards that care about quest counters, that's just as idiosyncratic as the tribal solution, right? Like that doesn't really allow me to design cards with really broad synergies that can apply to this archetype and that might apply to other archetypes and whatever, right? That's not really a solution. But if I care about counters more generally, then maybe this is a solution. And so I thought, okay, well, how do I do that? How do I care about counters more generally? And my solution was proliferate, which if you watched the previous video, you would know that that was already a mechanic in the set. And at this point in my set design, I had already decided to add proliferate. And so it just made sense to add it to synergize here with the quest archetype as well. And now a color identity is coming together as well for, which colors does this archetype go into, and Simic makes sense as a proliferate thing. And so I just slapped +1/+1 counters on top of that as well to give it a little bit more life when you don't have your quests going on. And also because creatures form like the basis of what you're doing in draft. So there has to be something that benefits your creatures, I think, a little more directly for this to be successful as an archetype. So what I ended up with is Simic, +1/+1 counters, quests, proliferate. And this is a really hitting you over the head type of archetype card for Simic that's telling the player just exactly what it is they care about and why. Okay, but if you want to pause and read this card, you can, but it's not super relevant to this video. Just want to say that that's how I solved the problem. I think it's kind of an interesting puzzle to solve. Again, I'd be curious if you have alternative solutions to this puzzle. And, Magic hasn't done this. WotC, in Zendikar, there was no quest archetype, and in Fallout, there was no quest archetype. Now, maybe they didn't want to have a quest archetype, but it could be that they were equally as stumped as I was about, well, how do you do that? I don't know. It'd be interesting to hear. Hey, Mark Roserotter and team, if you're out there, I would love I'd love your thoughts. Okay, let's take a look at another card, because there's an opportunity that hasn't yet been taken advantage of, which is that, we're accruing these extra quest counters, but they don't do anything. So this is the other signpost uncommon for Simic. It's Hero's Ascent. It's a transforming dual face card, and its front face costs a green and a blue for a legendary enchantment quest at uncommon. Whenever a land you control enters, scry 1 and put a quest counter on Hero's Ascent. Then you may transform Hero's Ascent. So, okay, just looking at the front face, landfall, scry 1, put a quest counter on, but there's nothing that's checking the quest counters or using them, so that must be on the backside, right? And then it says, then you may transform Hero's Ascent. So there must be some reason you wouldn't want to. Maybe you want additional scries, maybe you want an opportunity to put more quest counters on it. Okay, let's read the backside and understand this card now. It transforms into the Kingdom of Hyrule, which is a legendary land that can tap to add 1 mana of any color, or pay 1, remove a quest counter from a permanent you control, target creature you control explores, activate only as a sorcery. So this makes sense now. You want additional quest counters on it, potentially, so that you can explore more. And also notably, this doesn't just remove quest counters from itself, it removes quest counters from a permanent you control, any permanent. So now this makes sense of why this would care about other quests. If you have lots of other quests and you're getting beyond its, third or fourth or however many quest counters it needs to satisfy its condition, now you can pilfer those quest counters in order to allow your creatures to explore. And if you don't have those quests down, or you play this early and are worried about drawing into them, you can let this accrue a few quest counters before transforming it. So when you do, you get a few additional explorers. The floor of this card it's kind of hard to evaluate, but this is how I would explain the floor of this card. You cast this on turn 3, then you play your land per turn. So you scry 1, put a quest counter on, it transforms, and then you use that additional mana you just played to the board to have a creature you control explore. So overall, you spent 3 mana to scry 1, put a quest counter on a creature, ramp 1 because of this effect, and you also get the benefit of this in the future. So I think that's pretty good value on its floor, which is nice. Like for a signpost uncommon, you don't want it to have so low of a floor unless you're able to do all the things that you need to do with it. I really like the design of this card, but also notable, this is really, really easy to design flavor-wise. That's what I noticed. In fact, if you look over on the side here, I went through 9 versions of this card, at least, before I came up with its current iteration, and it went through many different flavors along the way. It's not hard to come up with a reason why a card would care about quest counters on other cards. And Fallout did this as well. And in fact, I really just love the flavor of this card overall. Like your Link climbing the mountain, and the higher you climb, the further you see. And also the higher you climb, once you reach the top, the further you get to explore. So that makes sense how that's related. And then, you can come up with, it's not hard to come up with a reason why quest counters on other cards would also help you explore. Like as Link goes on more quests, he's by definition exploring more in the Kingdom of Hyrule. That kind of makes sense. So that's what I found. And Fallout did this on a couple of cards where they had it care about quest counters on other cards, or removing them, or adding them, or both. And so it's interesting to see that synchronicity there. So what did I do in common with WotC, and what did we do differently? They also had cards that do something on the trigger condition that puts a quest counter on. So even if the card gets removed, it still did something, even before you get the nth quest counter on it. In general, the cards don't really care about reaching in Fallout, about reaching a certain number of quest counters. So they're more like this design, the Hero's Ascent, than they are like, say, Tingle, that really wants to see that third quest counter on. There are a few of those designs. They did not take advantage of this Tingle technology of have the trigger condition be the same as the payoff condition. Now, they didn't necessarily need to, because all of the Fallout cards, I'm pretty sure, were rares, and this solution matters much more at lower rarities, particularly commons, where you need to simplify the card and really reserve card space, for adding keywords without making it too verbose, because verbosity matters a lot more at common. So yeah, some interesting different solutions to these problems. I would encourage you to go check out the Fallout cards. If you're interested and you want to like design your own, design a card. Shoot me a link to an image or even just type it up in the comments below. And if I get enough of those, like maybe I'll make a video reviewing your own Zendikar style quest. I think that could be fun. Let me know what else you'd like to see in this set. There's a lot to cover. So far, the two videos I've posted are basically like what I'd call solved problems. Like I ran into this problem in the set, and let me tell you what I explored and what I found out. But there are also like lots of unsolved problems. Maybe you're interested to see that. Maybe you want to know about the archetypes. I don't know. It'd be great to see what you guys are interested in, but I'm really loving making these videos. It's really helping me to like think through my design choices to talk about it out loud. So thanks so much for watching. Hope to catch you in the next one.